Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. Virginia Tech beat Old Dominion 36-17. How are you feeling on this victory Wednesday, Robbie? How you doing?
I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. That's for sure. Actually, no, we are. We're going to break it down and we're going to go through the good. But I, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. The season's off to a good start. It could have started dreadfully, so we should be happy.
I mean, there are some teams that want that week one back, and we are not one
Yes.
of them. So why don't you give us a cheers?
I'll go. Cheers to a W and uh, a I'll call it. There's some positivity that we'll go through. Some people are actually a lot more positive than I would have expected, especially when we get to our calls. So I think a competent offense is how I'll characterize it. Not great, not not service. I'm not going to say serviceable. That would be insulting after a win and no turnovers and but competent. Let's put it
Somewhere
that
in
way.
there.
Yes.
Cheers, buddy. Yeah, let's get to some of the other stuff that happened because week one, I had talked a little bit about it on College Football Monday, or a lot about it, just that the biggest story coming out of it was Colorado. And I'm
Hmm.
going to pull up the AP poll on the screen here just so we can talk a little bit about it with you. That was just so surprising to me. What did you think about them beating TCU? Did you have any inkling that was coming?
No, no, not with how much attrition there was on that team. I mean, that is very difficult to do, and not attrition like how much the clean house cleaning, I guess, would be the
Yeah.
better way to put it. Not like people leaving, people getting booted out. That's difficult to do it. We know that they had the number one recruit in the nation. We Hunter, right, and he is an absolute stud. But their quarterback is absolutely legit.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So I was stunned. I think at best, some people outside of Colby Dant, he'll always let you know if he picks something right. He won't be quiet about it. Evidently, he had the buffs in this one. Everybody else I heard talk about this game said at best they thought maybe Colorado could keep it close, and they ended up pulling the W.
Yeah, and Colby is a friend of ours who does the sports gambling podcast specifically under that umbrella. It's called The College Experience, and he's very good at picking games. And he indicated that he took the buffs
Yeah,
on Twitter. That I told you, like I saw it after the fact. But you're right, not many people were doing that. It was it was a very impressive game, especially offensively from Colorado and Shador Sanders. But let's get to some of the other stuff. Obviously, Florida State got the big win. You'll see on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, Utah took down Florida. Washington put a beat down on Boise State. That's usually a team that gives them trouble. We were picking that game, and man, they looked good. Penix looked good. Oklahoma. I know it was Arkansas State, but Arkansas
yeah,
State's a pretty decent football program, and that
yes.
was a statement, in my opinion.
They just, I mean, demolished them, and yes, Arkansas State is a decent team, and I think that is a big statement right there that they wanted to send.
And then I don't know why A&M is on this graphic, but they got to win. Connor Wegman, I said he played well at the very end of CFP Monday, and he did. He had a great QBR. But UNC, we were both doubters, and that
Mhm.
defense looked legit, and they got a very nice win against South Carolina.
They did, and 14 points, 2 touchdowns. I did not expect that. If anything, I thought it would have been a closer game.
Finally, on Monday, we were all watching the Duke and Clemson game, and when I talked to Kyle Bailey about it, we were both of the opinion, Duke might give him some trouble. Elko's a good coach,
Mhm.
but Clemson will probably go out and take care of their business. Well, they fell all over themselves, fumbled it twice inside the 10, two missed field goals, tons of other mistakes, miscues, whatever you want to call it. Klubnik didn't look good. Riley Leonard did look good.
Yep.
And Duke won a very weird 28-7 game.
That is Again, where would you stack that up against Colorado? in terms of expectations and what you thought was going to happen? Like,
That
which
is a
one
great question.
is more probably a shocking result to you?
I still would say Colorado, but the Duke result is very shocking. It
Mhm.
was very shocking. At least
Yeah,
Duke was at home.
yeah,
Colorado went to Fort Worth and did that. That was
yeah,
that was the really impressive part. But Duke entered the poll. They're number 21. Clemson dropped all the way down to 25. Probably doesn't deserve to be ranked after that, but they are Clemson. They'll probably go ahead and rip off a bunch of wins after this.
yep,
FSU moved up to number 4, so they would be in a playoff 4 if things were to end like this. LSU dropped 9 spots down to number 14 after really not looking too good in the second half there. FSU
mhm,
kind of took it to them.
yep.
UNC moved up 4 spots to number 17. So now we got 4 ACC teams in the rankings. Clemson just barely. Colorado popped in. Do you think they should be ranked after beating TCU?
I I think so because that was not fluky on offense. It looked really good. So for that reason, I say yes. And I don't really look down on TCU for that loss either. I think Colorado played a really good game,
And
and
TCU is, they're replacing a not
yeah,
including their offensive coordinator. So it maybe more of a should have seen it coming, but man, I just didn't think they were going to be that good up front and on the defensive line, and they stayed with TCU the whole time and won.
yep,
So your 1 through 4 is Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, and Florida State. That is actually my playoff 4. Not exactly in that order, but that was my playoff 4 at the beginning of the year, and so far it's held. Ohio State is number 5. Didn't look so hot. They looked
yep.
fine, but you know they got
Quarterback
some work
issue.
to do. Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of comes back to what we talked about when we previewed it. That they have two decent quarterbacks, but they do right as of now they do not have an elite quarterback. But they do have elite wide receiver talent.
yeah. Let's move to the injury update on Nick Gallo. He is unfortunately out for the year. He had season-ending surgery. I'm not exactly sure what the surgery was, but he is out for the year, and that is very disappointing because one, it's a good Hokie. He's been on the team forever. His brother was on the team for a long time, and now he's missing what is likely his final year for the Hokies. And he's a great blocker and a
Yeah,
solid player, like that guy, a veteran that we could use this year.
yeah, and a veteran in that locker room for the tight ends. So
Yeah,
he can still be that if he wants to be involved in the program and be, um, talk to the guys and help them. But it's a bummer not to have him really active and being, the injuries. It just sucks that he had a surgery and to miss your last season is just the worst way to go out.
yeah, it's horrible. We are number 65 in the SP Plus after week 1. Purdue is number 64. So very, very close. And then if you go to the FPI, we are number 62. Purdue is number 61. So we cannot get away from them. This is from the advanced computer metrics and predictive metrics, this is a very even matchup. So we will get into the Purdue game a little bit later. Our pick'em had its first week, and I did not do so well.
Me neither.
if you look, if you listen to the pod and you heard our picks, you probably assumed that we didn't do so well because we picked a lot of bad games. But the ones that we didn't pick also didn't go great. So I'm bringing up the rear. But we did have 2 people that went 8-2. That was Hokie Bo and K Smith 13. Congrats to you. And then there were 7 more people at 7-3. So some good weeks for people out there. I think there's about, I can't remember because not everyone made their picks. People sign up for a pick 'em and don't.
Yep.
So like there was probably 10 or 20 people that didn't make picks. There's probably 60 people that did. So
Yeah.
if you were 7-3 or 8-2, nicely done.
What if you're 3-7? Is that good? Is
Well,
that
guess what, Rob? It's one better than me.
yeah, that's
I
true.
will I will say this. I am never good week 1. Like I need to do the George Costanza in week 1. Just do the opposite of whatever urge I have. Cause I swear to God, as long as back as I can remember, every week 1, I get blown out of the water. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I will pick it up. I'm gonna make a run at this thing. Let's get to the game recap.
Yep.
First quarter was 2-0. It wasn't a blistering first quarter. They had snapped the ball out of the back of the end zone. So it was 2-0 Virginia Tech after 1. But we opened up the passing game and opened up the second quarter on the first play with a touchdown pass to Lane. Both teams scored twice in the second quarter, and ODU put in a field goal at the last second to make it 16-10 at the half. But we were able to separate by the end of the third with a touchdown run by Wells and added a couple field goals. Hokies won 36-17. I'm kind of going away from the longer game recaps this year.
I like it.
And I want to allow the voices to recap the game for you. So I'm going to play the voicemails. Hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube, you can hear it. When I splice this into the pod, it'll have a little background music.
All right, Hokies. Everyone just breathe. Step off the ledge. We didn't look too good. We didn't look too bad.
Hey, Tootie, this is Devin. You know, there was a lot of good things about this game. Sure, we can nitpick some things, but it's good to get the win. Main Stadium was rocking.
Wow, what a great game.
Grant Wells, take away some of the drops, take away some of the bad snaps that messed up the timing. Everything looked pretty good on offense.
Really great to see Wells be a competent quarterback, and I guess having the right wide receivers around him was a big deal.
Well, we played well. Just hope we don't leave points on the field in ACC play.
On defense, though, that's a completely different story. It looked like we had no contain on the edge. We could not stop the A-gap run and rush up the middle.
Can't run the ball, can't stop the run. I don't know how ODU's gashing us for 10 yards of carry.
The defense, wow, 5 sacks. That is great. 3 turnovers.
2 fumbles, great, but they were both on like 10-plus yard run plays. But then we got lucky, timely.
What I'm most curious about this week, of course, is how Robbie feels about the defensive end play. I believe he had 5 sacks on the game. Is his insatiable lust for quality defensive end play sated, or does he need to see more?
This could have been a really, really rough game. Glad it wasn't. Want to know feels good.
But keep your chin up. There's a lot of stuff to learn from this game. Came out with a really good win, covered the spread, scored 30 points, did everything that we wanted to do, although it may not have looked like some of our fans wanted.
It was good to get a competent win. Nobody was magical. Nobody did anything crazy. And we didn't shit the bed. That's as good as it gets, man.
Hey, Pete. Robbie. How the fuck are you guys? I'm not going to say anything negative, man. Let's just get stoned on the swings together. Go fucking Hokies. Good fucking night.
All right, Hokie.
That was tremendous. And
Yes.
I should have said earmuffs before we
Earmuffs.
started that. Typically last year I would say, hey, if you got kids in the car, watch the voicemails. That was a great few calls. I mean, I think I had like 7 calls. They all came in at the same time after the game. If you want to get in on the reaction line next week, it's 540-251-2169. Call us during the game, call us after the game, and I will squeeze your call in there. I chop them up, squeeze them together, and it was great to have that.
Yeah.
It adds a lot of texture to the podcast, and we love it.
Yes, it's so good to have the calls back. It just it feels right, and we finished it off the right way with stoned on the swing. So I think. Well, my take when I heard the calls, I was pleasantly surprised. I wrote my entire preview of the game without checking Twitter. I still haven't checked Twitter because I got rid of Twitter. So I went off of absolutely nothing this week. So I have no input from any of the blogs, any of that kind of stuff, nothing. And so the first thing that I had heard from anybody was actually the voicemails. And I was like, man, that's more positive than I am, which kind of made me feel good. I was kind of excited.
I did like how they waffled back and forth between, like, someone would say the exact same thing, like turnovers, good. And they has like turnovers, but they were lucky.
Yes.
There was such that, what do they call that? The dichotomy of man or something?
Yes, exactly. And everybody can see the same thing 2 different ways. That's for sure.
That's right. I thought the story of the game was Grant Wells settling down and utilizing our new talent at the skill positions. That's what I thought the biggest takeaway was, is like, okay, we've got some playmakers that we can actually use this year.
I 100% agree. I texted with you. I was borderline scared shitless at the beginning of that game because it looked exactly like last year. There,
Mhm.
it looked to a T. There was the missed screen pass to kick us off to a wide open
Right.
person. There was the throw behind lane. There was probably 4 or 5 very inaccurate tosses. Maybe one of those was a drop of those, but it was tough. And then things kind of settled down with time and alleviated some of my concern there.
And the announcers did talk about it. They said he looks a little amped up, and that Hasselback really made us pay for that screenplay too. He's like, "That would have gone for a long way." It's like,
Hmm.
God damn it.
He
But
really rubbed it in.
but after a few overthrows or whatever, he was able to settle down. 17 of 29, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns passing, and 1 rushing with 27 rush yards. 165.5 rating and an 88 QBR. When you look at the numbers, you're like, oh my God, what a fantastic game. And I think the beginning of the game kind of tainted our view,
Yeah.
even though it started to go really well.
Yes, it took looking at the numbers again, revisiting, watching film again for me to get rid of that initial, because I think it's because I had so much fear going into the game that we may see something like last year, that when we started to see it, I kind of freaked out, and
You're right on.
that stuck with me for a while. Um, that said, I think it could have been better. I mean, some of those passes we'd like to have back, I think could have gone for good yardage. Some of them, I think the wide receivers in a couple places dropped some balls that they definitely should have put their hands on. We had a tight end that dropped 2, and it was a little bit tough. But overall, the absolute story of the game is settling in and using the weapons. And I think that combined with that, we have true weapons. I think I now in seeing Ali Jennings, one on the slant pass, the fade pass over to the for the touchdown. That was incredible. I also like the sweep pass over to him, where he made a guy miss. Had a nice blocker where he took that one in. Lane's touchdown on the crossing slant route was really, really nice.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, he is fast. There are some weapons here with wide receivers, and it is exciting because it's been a little while.
And after later in the game, some of those throws were really nice, like right on the money. And Jennings was everything we thought he could be. I mean, that was a really good when you get 2 touchdowns. I know he didn't go over 100, but like that is about as good of a debut as you could ask for. And
Yep.
he seems like that dude. And I just you looked at Grant's QBR. People had been tweeting about it this week that, oh man, he's in the top 20. And I said it on the show on Monday. And it was his best QBR in a game since he got to Tech. It was the 3rd best of his career as a starter. He's made a lot of starts. I
Yeah,
mean, it was a really good game from where it started. So it could have been a great game, but it was a very, very good game when it was all said and done for Grant Wells.
I agree.
All right. Did you have
The
anything? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, offense. Do we go? I don't think we have to talk about the rush game and what
Yeah.
running the ball. So I want to combine it with the offensive line. I think the offensive line did an awesome job in. There were some times he was kind of running for his life, but did a much better job in pass protection than they did last year. Uh, that said, where I think there was a lot of challenge was opening up holes for the run game, because both Thomas and Tootin were busting their ass for extra yards. That was not one of those kind of mail it in running back situations. Like, those guys were hustling to get
Yes.
every yard that they could on some of those runs, and people were all over them. And maybe that was just a really good play calling by the defense, but it seemed like there weren't a lot of holes for them to actually break something. And you had Tootin had 19 carries for 55 yards. Thomas had 12 carries for 22 yards. They're, they're I'm not I'm not worried about it at all, because I was actually excited about how they were running and the way that they were squeaking out yards on runs where really they should have been dead on arrival. They should have been dead at the line of scrimmage, and they were squeaking out 4 or 5 yards. So I actually come away feeling good about the running backs, and then a little bit worried about us creating some lanes for them in the offensive line and using the tight ends and otherwise.
Did you get a chance to read French's piece?
I did not. I told you I'm coming in fresh. These are
Okay,
all
okay.
Robbie opinions, and
I'm coming in a complete opposite of you. I looked at way too much stuff, and I did get a chance to read French's article, which I know me and you normally get a chance during the week to take a look at it. And he talked about the run game and how the zone scheme we were running and how close the guys are together in terms of the offensive linemen and the tight ends. Even when the blocks were decent, there was just so narrow of a space between the guys. There was barely any hole. And so your eye assessment is right alongside with what French had to say. The guys were running hard. Tootin was running hard, and Tootin had 55 really tough yards on 19 attempts. He and Malachi combined for 94 yards from scrimmage. So you have 175 yards from the 3 top wide receivers we brought in the portal, and three touchdowns and 3 catches over 30 yards. Then you add the 94 yards from scrimmage from Tootin and Malachi.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of production from our stars. And so I'll take that every day of the week, but you're absolutely right. There were no holes in the running game. Anything that we did was on the backs of the backs. They were the ones making it happen. So that absolutely needs to improve. I did think the running backs picked up blitzes really well.
Yeah.
There was a lot of good blocks by both guys.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
And that is why we had no sacks in the game,
Mm-hmm.
because the blitzers were being picked up, and no, the offensive line wasn't having a strong rushing performance day. But with regard to the pass blocking, Grant had time more often than not.
Yeah. And yes, there was a lot of off-season talk about establishing the run and all those sorts of things. But coming into this season, if you asked what we really wanted to get out of the offensive line to see a change this year in the offense to make it better, we would say pass blocking, and that's what they did. So they answered the call for what we needed to improve, which was give Grant Wells some time, keep him off his back, keep the sacks off the board, and allow him to use the playmakers.
And I completely agree with you, especially in light of who we brought in. When you bring in Allie Jennings and you bring in Felton and Lane, you better be able to pass block, because we have to get the guys the ball. And that was what we were able to do. Moving to just a couple more things on the offense, then we'll go to defense. 9 red zone chances in this game for the offense, 6 scores, and just 4 touchdowns. And I know you're like, oh, we scored touchdowns 4 to 9 times, and field goal a couple other times. Well, if you only score like 44% of your time in the red zone, if you get a touchdown, only that few, that's like 100th in the country. Like, that is not a good percentage. And we're sitting at 101, but normally it's like in the 115s, 120s if you're down at 44% in the red zone for TD percentage. So that needs to be better. We need to capitalize on more of our red zone trips. And I know we went for it on 4th down, and that's going to bring me to the final point on the offense. The swapping in and out of the quarterbacks on that early drive. Maybe you go first. What were your thoughts on it?
Unnecessary. It just didn't. I'm not going to hammer the decision. It's done. We won the game, but it seemed like we were using an excuse to get drones on the field and try and give him that package. And I think at that point in the game, before you know how things are going to play out, and knowing what our druthers were with last year, you just do whatever you need to do to score the touchdown. You don't screw around with, something like that, just in my opinion.
And you make it really tough on Wells to come in on 4th down and then throw a pass.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to bring him in on 4th down and run a read option where he might have a chance to run the ball up the middle or something, that's one thing. But bring a guy in and out, and then expect him to throw a perfect pass. Like, well, he didn't. And there might have been a reason for that. I think they brought in drones that early, maybe because it was pre-planned, but maybe because they're like, okay, Grant's got to settle down. Let's bring him to the sideline. Let me chat with him, throw in drones for a few plays, and then we'll see. And they put the kibosh on it early. They cut it out and they moved on from it. But now we're hearing again that they wanted get him in a package of plays against Purdue, and it just scares me because I remember when they did this with Marquise Williams and Mitch Trubisky at UNC, and it's like, keep doing it because you're screwing up the whole rhythm of your offense, and Marquise Williams is really good. Like sometimes, even if you have a guy you believe in athletically and he's really good as a backup quarterback or whatever, you can't force it. You've got, it has to work, and it has to work in rhythm. It's tough.
And I know we've talked about this before, but we've seen this story with Quincy Patterson, and it didn't work out because unless where it works out is if you do it a couple times to get it in other people's heads, and then you throw them out there, and then you have them throw a pass and just throw everybody off their get like that, almost as a kind of a trick play. Just a really, that is, if you set that up, that can work really well when you need to pull that card. But I don't get the sense that that's what we're trying to do here.
And they did have drones throw a couple passes, but it's not, they weren't deep shots. They were still controlled, and it didn't prevent them from stacking the box up against drones. So if you can't prevent that, then you're never going to get his dual threat ability. And
correct.
You're just ruining whatever Grant can give you in that moment. Let's go to the defense. And first, the good stuff. We got pressure. As our callers talked about, 5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and a lot of that pressure was with 4-man fronts.
Yeah. APR had 2 sacks. So we're tracking. We're way ahead already. So with 2 sacks right out of the gate on my prediction for the year. The edge, there was pressure coming off. There was a little bit of Daddy Nicholas from APR in terms of over pursuit on his bull rush, and that it found himself out of position, and it opened up. Like the caller said, we were having trouble in the A gap and kind of up the middle runs. So I think the defensive line struggled, but I think it's even more so the defensive line with the linebackers, and the linebackers filling the right gaps. And I think we were missing gaps, and we were getting gashed because of it. I don't think it was necessarily just because of ODU's offensive line or their tight ends blocking or anything along those lines. I think we were missing appropriate gaps, and they made us pay for it. They had a 27-yard run, a 25, a 22, and a 15. Our longest run was 10 yards, to put it in perspective. So that there's 201 yards on the ground in total, but we got pressure, and I like the blitz, I like the aggressiveness, but we caught some punches because of it.
I think the good news is I think what we did wrong is largely fixable, and was a kind of a symptom of that, the way they were spreading us out, the way ODU was running their offense. And you're dead on in that. I thought it was the defensive ends losing contain until I heard Pry talk after the game saying like, nah, that was really a linebacker and DB issue of not filling the right gaps. And French emphasized that as well. And if you looked at, when you go back and read French's stuff, it's enlightening that Tisdale made some bad reads, Keller made some bad reads, some mistakes, and it really cost us. And that was the disappointing part. Was Keller wasn't great. Tisdale took over at Mike. Stroman getting ejected didn't help anything either, because he's a great tackler and a smart player, and he probably would have been in there to prevent some of those long runs. But when you give up 201 yards, when they have a snap that goes over someone's head and loses 20 plus, and you sack them and have 9 tackles for loss, well, that means it was a bad rushing night for your defense. And so that's got to get cleaned up, but I think it can get cleaned up. And I think that's one of those week 1 to week 2 things where a big difference can be made in that linebacking core.
Yeah, I agree. It is fixable if people are hitting the right gaps. I want the ends to keep pursuing. I just want the linebackers and the defense and the defensive backs to get in there, and that they need to close up the holes if the defensive ends are going bull rush or pass rush on it. And that didn't happen. And this used to happen under Bud Foster a lot too, is when we get aggressive on our blitzes, and I noticed this on like 4 or 5 plays on their long runs. Uh, we play man with the defensive backs and everybody's deep, and then the linebackers come in to fill holes. And if they don't hit the right hole, all of a sudden there's like a 20-yard gap between the last linebacker that we have, who's now on the line, all the way to our defensive backs. So if they break a run for more than 3 yards, it's 23 yards. And
Yeah.
hence why they had a 22-yard run, a 25-yard run, a 27-yard run. And I'm not a scheme guy. I'd love to talk to French about it, but I feel like somebody should be in that middle. One of the linebackers should be there, or one of, somebody's got to like be in position. Like
That's
there
because
shouldn't be that big of a
they
hole.
got blocked out of the play
Yeah.
2 yards off the line of scrimmage because they made the wrong read. Like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
that's the reason they're not there. And that is where we miss Dax, because
Yeah.
say what you want about Dax, but I don't think they're doing this the other night if we have him back there. So
Yeah.
that really showed, but I do expect it to get better. Let's talk about a couple of the good things before we move on to Purdue. Oh, that's this thing with the rushing and all. Card can move, so
Yes.
this may come back, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about it later. The secondary was solid, less
Yes.
than 100 yards passing for ODU. That's what I thought was going to be the issue because of the system they run, but it turned out it opened it up for those inside runs. Chris Coleman had the stat that we actually outgained them when they targeted Delane and Strong, because Strong's interception went back 32 yards, and when all the other passes that went to those guys was less than that.
That's
So
funny.
it was a
That's
great stat
crazy.
by him. But Nazir had 5 tackles, a pass breakup, and a forced fumble, 2 hurries for Kelly Lawson, who could have played better, but he also
Yeah.
had a tackle for loss. Burgos had that sweet sack early in the game. Penny had one, Jaden McDonald had one, and of course Dorian got the interception. So it was a good night, and the fact that we were able to gain 3 turnovers instead of giving up 5 in last year's game, and I think had a -4 when it was all said and done last year. I mean, that was a huge difference in this game. Absolutely huge difference. The transfers and the turnovers, which one of those transfers was helping get those turnovers. The portal helped us win this game,
Yep.
and I'm so grateful we were able to bring those guys in.
Absolutely. I also I know he did not have a great night for a number of different reasons, but Keller is a beast. I don't know if you saw him sometimes in the set, and I know he missed some spots and stuff like that, but we talked a lot about him being like a jack dude, just a physical freak of nature. There were a couple times where he was like, it was like a mini bomb went off, like in the center of like the line, like he was just like ripping apart like three guys.
This is
Yeah.
tough with the names. Did you say Keller or Kelly?
Sorry, Keller.
Keller. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was I thought
he has that
I thought-
ability. He has that ability.
He's an absolute Jaden Keller, just so we're all clear.
Yeah.
He popped off the screen a couple times for me, and I was like, damn, because you had talked about him a little bit, and I know the team was talking about him, but having seen it for the first time on the field, it was pretty exciting. I think he's going to get. If he's going to progress throughout the year, I think he's going to be an absolute, stud for Virginia Tech.
Yeah, he's got to get there mentally, but
Yep.
he could be really, really good. And speaking of big hits, let's just briefly talk about the targeting calls. They were super frustrating, and I get it. There was some kind of emphasis put down before this weekend because there was a lot of targeting calls all over college football, but we seem to have like 2 or 3 back to back to back, and a couple of our guys got thrown, and then one of their guys did get thrown out too, but Henderson's hit that seemed just the same as all the other ones, but he got to stay, and he's like their best player. But whatever. We have talked endlessly about you can't make sense of these targeting calls.
Yeah. Well, I think they reviewed 6 or 7 plays. It was
a lot.
A lot.
It was at
there
least
were
4.
3 plays reviewed in the first quarter alone.
Well, we had 2 guys ejected, and they had 1 guy ejected, so there's 3. And then they reviewed Caleb Woodson. He played a lot of snaps in this game, even though he's a true freshman, but he got to stay.
Yes, it was wild. But
on special teams, we saw the great return by Holloway at the end of the game.
Yep.
There's we got to make him the every time return man. And that's not a unique thing to say. Lots of people have said that after watching the game. But there's a double reason. We can't risk Lane to injury.
No.
He's too good of a receiver. And Holloway I'm sure he could be a good receiver one day, but right now he's a tremendous punt returner. So spread the wealth here. Like let's protect Lane and get Holloway an electric return man in the game at the same time.
And Lane, and we had kick returns, 3 kick returns, one from Tootin, one from Thomas, and one from Lane, which is crazy. And the first one, Tootin and Thomas were fighting over the ball before Thomas just, went up to just nabbed it. But they had 21 yards, 18 yards, 16 yards. But I definitely want Lane off of kick returns. It's at least punts. You're more often than not, you're waving it, fair catch. But kick returns, a lot of times they're bringing it back, and that's full throttle football right there that could really be dangerous for him. And I just don't want to risk that at all.
Using your star players in the kick return or punt return game is something Frank Beamer did. It's not some coaches have the philosophy, I want to do it. It gives us a better chance in the third phase of the game. Other coaches are, I don't want to hurt this guy. But when it comes to the Lane and Holloway thing, like you're not sacrificing any performance to get this guy on the field. So
agreed.
John Love made both his kicks. So we got our first, real showing of John Love this season, and he made both his kicks. So that was nice. Let's do, I guess, some final takeaways. We kind of covered a lot of the stuff. Did you have any final takeaways just on the win in general?
No, I don't think so. I think all of my notes. And I guess we got the question of whether I am excited or satisfied with the defensive line, and I am very excited about the defensive ends. I like the aggressiveness, and I like what I was seeing. I just want to shore up a little bit and make sure that we're containing the run a lot better than we did in this game. But I like the aggressiveness, and I think we got some speed coming off the edge.
The pure playmaking ability on the edge just seems way ahead of where we've been the last couple seasons.
Yeah.
I do think it was an extremely important win. We talked about winning by 14 points. That was my take. If we win by 14 or more, I'm going to feel good about us going to a bowl. Well, that's true. And we won by 19, and getting a 19-point victory against a team that always gets up to play us. It was an important win. And after last year, I am so pleased. During the game, maybe with some of the grand stuff, you're caught up in the, we should be better. It could be more points. We left points on the field there. It was a good, solid performance. As the caller said, we didn't shit the bed. We didn't screw it up, especially Wells. He overcame those early jitters. That was really good sign. And we scored more than 30 points, which we didn't do all of last year. So I am grateful. It could have been 40, but that's almost better. Like leaving some stuff out there, it gives the coaches enough things to point to on tape. We're not feeling ourselves, but still gives us some confidence. So it might have been the perfect, let's call it the perfect victory, Robbie.
I think it is a good way to put it. But yeah, we left probably 14 on the 7 for sure, because I really think we should have got that one, touchdown. But even at the end after the Holloway run, so we left that out there. So I think it was probably 14 more points that we left out there that could be, cleaned up and fixed.
Let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor before we get to Purdue. The Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Roback. Roback is a performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. This is the polo company that just put out the new VT polos. It's a white shirt with maroon Virginias all over the polo. It's gorgeous. It's called the Commonwealth. And with our promo code 2DVT, you can get 20% off your first order from Roback. They have hoodies, tees, quarter zips, put a bunch of stuff in there because you're going to get 20% off all of it. Women's stuff too. Buy your girlfriend or wife something nice. And that code again, 2DVT, 20% off your order. Roback, crave activity. I will be tweeting out the link. I did it a couple times, but I'll put it out there for you again tomorrow so you guys have it. We got a question before we get to our beer stuff, Robbie. We got a question from Joshua Carter, and it was for you. He said, how do you get used to the fact that NA beers cost as much as regular beers?
um, pretty easy. I don't drink alcohol anymore, and I love beer. So the price. It's a good question because the price has it's all supply and demand, right? The demand used to be so low for non-alcoholic beers that uh, and it's increased dramatically. But also to that, non-alcoholic beer is actually very difficult to make. It requires a lot of the same processes, if not even more
Hmm.
processes, to actually make sure that the alcohol is not in there for it to be a non-alcoholic beer that tastes good. So for me, that's how I really rationalize it. If I wanted to go get O'Doul's, I could probably I don't know what O'Doul's cost because I would never buy that, but if I go get O'Doul's, then it's probably pretty cheap. Maybe that price has increased as well, but, for me, it's I'm buying quality, and that's what I actually care about, but I get it that there's no alcohol in it, but it's a lot of times a pain in the ass to keep the alcohol out of it and have it be a good beer.
That's a good point on that because the process itself could be more expensive, and so it kind of evens itself out. And you could make the case that maybe it should cost more. Like
Yeah.
who even knows? But I do get frustrated when I go to a bar or whatever, and maybe I'm DD that night, or my wife wants to order a mocktail, and it's $9, and it's like, okay, this is literally just the exact same ingredients, but no alcohol.
Yes.
That like this should be way less.
I I totally get it from that perspective, but for me, there's no alternative for me, so it doesn't really it's a little different than maybe some other people, and for obviously from you, it's like, well, then I might as well just get a real drink. So for me, there's no alternative. So
Yeah,
that
and
that,
I
that
do
doesn't
think
really
that
happen.
the NAs probably come in a couple bucks cheaper. Like I would
Yes.
even if you're getting a nice
Usually like a
IPA NA.
dollar. It's usually
Yeah.
it used to be like $4 cheaper for NA when they were first starting to come out and they were starting to be good. Now they're like a buck or two cheaper for
Yeah.
a six pack if you compare the regular beer. And you can compare it because Brewdog makes all of their normal, like their Elvis, most of their beers, they make a alcoholic and a non-alcoholic
Oh,
of
okay.
basically the same beer. Like Elvis and Elvis AF, the as alcohol free or as F word is they make it in both, so you can actually compare them.
Are you drinking anything over there tonight?
I'm fully on the green tea, and I
Okay.
was going to get a beer, but it would have been the same thing I've had on here, and I don't want to bore people. I know
It's
people
all
get
good.
mad with
W-
so
you just said your piece on beer, so
yeah,
I'll
I mean,
go with mine.
yeah.
The Neshaminy Creek Ultra Kush. I thought it said Ultra Crush, but it's Ultra Kush
Oh,
Hazy IPA. And Neshaminy Creek's a Pennsylvania brewery, not too far from me. This is 6% alcohol. It's really good. It's
really?
one of your standard hazy IPAs, but you know how I like to be in the 6.5 or even 6.0 range because I can drink more of them.
Yep.
But this thing is awesome. The Chamonix Creek, like I haven't always loved their beer, but this one's really impressed me. I decided to go for it, and I'd recommend it. Bucks County, Pennsylvania is where this is out of. The Ultra Kush Hazy IPA. You can see it in the glass here. It's beautiful looking in my triple crossing glass. Let's get to Purdue, man.
Oh wow.
9/9, 12 p.m. It's a nooner on ESPN2. Purdue is coming off a loss. They
Yeah.
had an opening game, a bye game, as you might call it. They paid Fresno to come in to Lafayette, and
Fresno's
they
not a bad game though. You and I know that. So like,
no, not in the
yeah,
not in the sense
yes,
they had to pay, but
yes,
no, it's not an easy
absolutely.
game. It's never going to be an easy game. They're a good
Yep,
football program, and
yep.
they lost 39-35 coming into the year. They had projected Athlon had projected Purdue to be 57th.
Hmm.
Their FPI was 50. Their SP plus was 48. Well, all of those numbers have dropped. So the FPI went from 50 to 61. The SP
Hmm.
plus went from 48 to 64. So it was a sizable change for them. And they went to their championship game in the Big Ten last year. They won the division. They played
Hmm.
for the Big Ten title, but that was a much different team. One, they had Jeff Brom.
Yep.
Two, they had 5 guys drafted off of that team. And they also were one of the hardest hit portal teams of anyone out there because so many guys followed Brom to Louisville.
Yeah, they got poached pretty hard. That's for sure. But yeah, it was a tough game and a weird game too, because if you look at it, Purdue controlled most of that game right up until the fourth quarter. Their win probability was very high, and then Fresno just, put some stuff together, and that's a tough loss for them. But I think their fan base was at least recognized, at least from what I was reading, that Fresno State's a good team and certainly a well coached team, in both respects. I think offensive and defensively.
And they were going up against a team with a first-year head coach in Ryan Walters,
Yep.
who runs a defensive scheme which should be good at some point during the year. But I was listening to Cover 3, and they talked about how when he gets to a school, like even at Illinois, his defenses were awesome, but it took a little time to get there. This was week 1 against a team that is known to usually have a good offense in Fresno State, and they scored 39 points. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. In terms of what we can expect from their offense, they got a transfer. That's one of the guys they brought in. It was one of the few places where, even though they lost Aiden O'Connell to the draft, they brought in Hudson Card, and that was a pretty solid replacement.
Yeah, he went 17 for 30. He had 254 yards and 2 TDs and a loss, which is a huge bummer. But he's good, and he can use his feet. So he's mobile, and I'm a little bit frightened by him, as well as his slot receiver, Dion Burks, who's an absolute stud. The two of them have me a little bit worried.
Yeah, when I was thinking we were going to get thrown on just a little bit by ODU, this is what I'm really worried about right here, because this is going to test our corners. Dion Burks, 4 for 152 against Fresno. He had an 84-yard TD last week, 2 touchdowns in the game. A couple other good weapons. The running back, Maccabee, is very good. He was right around 5 yards a carry last year.
Yep.
Almost 1,000 yards and 9 rush TDs a season ago, in addition to 274 rush yards. So he is a versatile player, and they brought back a bunch of other wide receivers. It wasn't just Burks. Like they've got a handful of guys.
Yeah, they got Abdur Rahman Yassin. He had 4 receptions.
You went for it.
I'll go for it. I don't nobody's gonna get that right. The announcers didn't even get that right, I'm sure. So 4 receptions for 46 yards. TJ Sheffield, who is somebody that we talked about in the preview.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't watch this game. I went and I read from people that I kind of trusted that looked like they knew what they were talking about. Evidently, he had a shit game last week, like absolutely dreadful, and was dragging ass. So perhaps he was out drinking the night before or something like that. But if he's good as he was expected to be, and Yassine is very good, that's 3 really good wide receivers for them that we got to be worried about.
Yeah, and their offensive line also brought a handful of starters back. They did lose Miller to Louisville after spring, so that hurt them at the tackle position. But in general, they're pretty good. They didn't give up a sack against Fresno State. They're going to be able to protect Card pretty well. And so this is creating a scenario that is like last week, but on steroids a bit, because these are better players. It's a much better quarterback that's experienced. With the quarterback last week, he played tough, and I'll give Grant Wilson some credit because he played tough and he sustained drives. I worry about Card running. I worry about these weapons. Fortunately, we do have good DBs, and so they're going to be put to the test. The thing about Purdue that really hurt them, third down. Against Fresno, they couldn't stay on the field. They were 3 of 12 on third down. They were actually heavily out first downed by Fresno State. Fresno State, they had it was 27-19 advantage in first downs. So that was a problem for Purdue. They couldn't stay on the field.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think Devin Maccabee needs to. He had a good rushing day, but I think he's a better running back than what he showed against Fresno. On the Purdue defense side, they got gashed by Fresno. I mean, 31 for 44 for 366 yards. So they play 5 DBs, 2 of their DBs are very good. The other 3 are not very good, and they're having communication challenges in the back end. So I think that that is a real opportunity for our guys. We know that we have at least 3, if not 4, really good people that we can put out there. So I think we can pick on their DBs in this game. And but we'll see. I think that's susceptible. Their defensive line is decent, but my understanding is they are having a lot of challenges at middle linebacker, and their outside linebackers are playing better. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think that this game, to your point, you said it could be like last week. This could be like last week in the Fresno Purdue game, just lower scoring. Like that's how I was thinking about it. But I'll wait till my key thoughts of to kind of back that up with what I think could happen here.
To piggyback on what you said about the linebackers, I thought that was going to be one of their better units. The kid Jenkins, Kydron Jenkins, he played defensive end last year, and since they're doing this scheme change, he's moved to outside linebacker, and he's a good player, but he's still learning that position. He did have a sack against Fresno, so even though he's still learning, he seems pretty good. The other 2 linebackers, maybe not a ton of athleticism, maybe not a ton of grasping the scheme quite yet, and it showed. And the pass D in the back end was terrible, as you said. The 4 touchdowns passing. One of the wide receivers on Fresno had 170 yards and 2 TDs on them. So this is an area for Allie Jennings and Jalen Lane to exploit. And that's all the more reason I don't really want to be messing around with the Kyron Drones thing. Like, I want to make sure Grant can get in a rhythm. If you're going to do it, be smart about it. Please be smart about it, because I think Grant could have a really big day. Their DBs had to make so many tackles last week. One of them had 10. Another one had 8 because they were just in their defensive backfield all day long.
Yeah. And Cam Allen, one of their defensive backs, was just getting picked on. They were just throwing on him. I think they threw like 9 passes on his guy. Like it was pretty brutal.
On special teams, their return men are actually pretty good. You talked about Sheffield, and he did bring back a punt 29 yards. I think it was the only thing he did the entire day. But Tyrone Tracy took a kickback for a touchdown.
Yeah.
And so their return game is going to be something to watch. And that could be the difference in this game, because whoever has less penalties, doesn't turn the ball over, gets that 1 extra block, like that's how this game's going to go. And that can move us to our offensive matchup or our overall matchup thoughts. It's going to be a close one, man. What are you thinking?
So here's my concern back to so Purdue just came off of a game that they played against a coach who knows how to exploit defenses, and they had to deal with that, as well as they scored pretty well against a team. Last year, Fresno had one of like the best defenses in the country, statistically. So that's kind of what Purdue just came off of in terms of what their first game reps were and what they got used to. We kind of screwed around with ODU for about a half a game, and they had 86 new players, right? So Fresno is way better than ODU, in my opinion. I think they're a better offensive team than Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech is a much better defensive team if we show what we should in that game. So where does it leave us, in my opinion? I think this could be turned into kind of a shootout, a low scoring like shootout, in the sense of like, final 2 possessions actually start mattering in this game, just based on what I see here.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you thinking like 27-24?
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's probably how I would peg it, and it could be a final possession type game.
Card can really whip it around, man. So while I trust our corners, I don't think we can or even should sell out against the run. I think you got to get those gap fits and those DBs in the right positions so we can avoid the big scrambles. and let our corners work and let the safeties work in the back end. And I think we'll be okay. I think Purdue's going to be a good tackling team. I don't think they're going to be in the position to make the tackles all the time. So our passing game should be effective. Got to get the ball out. They are probably going to play a little aggressive, and there will be holes. French indicated that there was a lot more available to us in the passing game against ODU, and that maybe Bowen got a little too conservative, or maybe he was conservative on purpose. You're going to have to ditch that stuff in this one because I think we're going to need points. But ultimately, I believe it to be a good matchup for us. I think we match up pretty well against Purdue, and I like our chances. And when a team like Purdue loses that much talent to the portal, loses that much talent to the draft, they don't replace it easily. And I don't think, even though we're right next to them in all of these like metrics, I don't think they've caught up quite yet. And I don't think the metrics have caught up to us quite yet, because what we saw, Jalen Lane wasn't a highly ranked guy. Ali Jennings wasn't a super highly ranked guy. And adding them into the system, that hasn't all been accounted for quite yet. So I think our team is better than we look on paper, and their team might be slightly worse than they look on paper. And I think all of that adds up to me thinking we can win this game. We just need to not turn the ball over and not go crazy with the penalties and play our game. And we can win. You're not going, are you?
I am not going.
Yeah, so. You sold your tickets to most of the games.
Yeah, I'm going to Pitt. So bringing my daughter to her first football game.
Oh,
so.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Her first game's going to be Pitt. Oh man.
Yeah. Can you believe that? I figured, if you're going to bring her, bring it to eat shit Pitt. That's what you got to do.
And it could be, hey, it's usually a slobber knocker of a game. So hopefully it is a good one for you guys. Before we get to our picks, I just want to tell you guys about Prize Picks. The Chudy Pokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. And right now, they're the only daily fantasy app that you can actually make plays using Ali Jennings, using Bayshal Tootin, using Kelly Lawson. You can use your very own Hokies in the plays. It's very cool. So go to Prize Picks, download the app, and use code Memory Lane for a deposit match up to $100. That's Memory Lane, all one word. And you get $100 to play Prize Picks Daily Fantasy made easy. There is a great slate of games this weekend. Really good slate.
There is.
Some ACC games, but a lot of stuff outside the ACC that's awesome. I have 5 games here. These are 5 games from our picks list. Notre Dame at NC State's the first one. I'm not even sure this qualifies as one of the really good games in the slate, but it's an interesting game, and it's in Raleigh.
Yeah. And it being in Raleigh and Notre Dame coming back from, I guess they had a game after the Ireland game, but this is their first real game. I forget who they played.
It was Tennessee. It was their first State. FCS team ever.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think it was the first time they ever played an FCS team, something like that.
Interesting. They're getting in on the goods. Those, pay people games.
Yeah.
Interesting that it's in Raleigh. I think that adds a little bit of spice here. That could be good. And it's a 7.5 point spread. We're going opposites this week because you and I were so dreadful. So I'm just going to go chalk and say, I think Notre Dame's going to cover the 7.5.
I'm going to take NC State, probably against my better judgment. I just feel like this is a tough test. And Sam Hartman, he's familiar with North Carolina, right? He went to college there in that state for a long time. So maybe this is a dumb pick by me, but that spread seems a little bit tight for how good Notre Dame's looked. And you get that hook, I'll take NC State. Next game, Iowa at Iowa State. This isn't Farmageddon. What do they have a name for this? Maybe it is Farmageddon. I can't remember.
No, I don't. Is it? Yeah, it might be.
There's some kind of name for it, but Iowa is going to Iowa State. Iowa State 4.5 point dogs at home. I'm going to take the Cyclones.
I'm also taking the Cyclones. Okay. So we agree on that one.
App State at UNC. This was a tremendous game last year in Boone. This year it's in Chapel Hill. 15.5-point favorites at home are the Heels. This is another one where, like, yeah, UNC just looked really good. I should take them to cover, similar to Notre Dame, but I'm going the other way. I'm taking App State.
This is tough. Am I a believer? I'm kind of a believer after that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go UNC. Wait, and I'm looking back. Iowa State. That's El Assico, isn't it?
That's what it is.
Yes.
I knew there
Yeah.
was a name. I couldn't come up with it.
Yes. So sorry. I was like, I didn't want to like say El Assico. I'm like, I'm almost positive that's El Assico.
I think it's K-State is in Farmageddon. It's K-State and like Oklahoma State or K-State and somebody.
Yeah.
Next game, SMU at OU. This is that Oklahoma team we just talked about. Looked really good against Arkansas State. How are you feeling about our new ACC brethren going up again, going to Norman?
Oh, that's funny. Dude, OU just dismantled. So that was not fluky. That is a lot of points. I got to go OU here.
And they have that quarterback that got to play a bunch, the backup quarterback who could be better than Dylan Gabriel, who's really, really good.
Yeah.
Man, don't ask me why. I'm taking SMU because I think part of it is, wouldn't you think that would be like a 21 points spread?
Yeah, I think so.
And so
I think it's smelly.
Yeah, it just seems a little smelly. I'm taking SMU. I'm playing the weird lines. I'm going to go freaking 2-8 again this week.
Going
Texas,
to Mustangs.
yeah, I'm going with the Mustangs. Texas at Alabama. This is the last game we're going to pick. This is the big one. Last year, you can make the argument that Texas should have won that game.
Yeah.
Came down to like a 2-point conversion or something like that. I can't remember exactly. Bama 7.5-point favorites at home. Are you a believer in Sarkisian?
Yes. As long as he's off the booze, then yeah, I'm a believer. That's 7.5. Given what happened last year, that's a Nick Saban revenge line,
right?
Like that's what that is, right? That because it was such a close game, Saban's going to come back and dismantle Texas, and guess what? I believe it. So yeah, I'm going to go Alabama.
It's a top 11 matchup. I don't think Texas was able to crack the top 10 this week, so it's a very good matchup, best matchup of the weekend probably. And I'm just delaying my pick because I have no idea what I want to do here. I think I had Texas, but I just don't buy them. I'm taking Bama. They were my playoff pick. I'm taking Bama to cover the 7.5.
All right.
Nick Saban does revenge pretty well.
Yeah,
and they didn't even lose, but he's still, he's still mad.
It doesn't matter. Like for him, rat poison he will create rat poison out of anything.
I did want to just run off some of the other games. We got Colorado and Nebraska. And so that's an old Big 12 matchup.
Old Big 12.
That is now going to be a Big 12, Big 10 matchup, but Colorado's at home and they are favored. Nebraska looked okay in that Minnesota game, but kind of a boring game in general. The other games I had, I just want to mention, Utah is going to Baylor. Baylor just had an embarrassing loss. One of the worst performances against the spread of any team this past weekend.
Yeah. That was
Texas A&M going to Miami. That is a decently important game for the conference.
I would say it is.
Yeah. And A&M's ranked. So Miami's, they're the dogs in this one. They're 4.5-point dogs at home, so we'll see. Mississippi and Tulane. Ole Miss and Tulane. This is a huge game for Tulane. This is like their Super Bowl because they're a G5 team. They don't get many chances to make that impression. This is a big game for them. And Ole Miss is favored by 7.5, but it is in New Orleans. So that's a fun one. I think that's about it. Oregon, Texas Tech. Texas Tech took some steam off that one, losing to Wyoming last weekend. Wisconsin, Washington State. That's a weird one. And Stanford is playing USC, but that is not expected to be very good.
No, they're at two different places. Well, I mean, one of them's an ACC school, so that goes to figure. So
there actually is an old Big East matchup happening this weekend, Rob.
Oh, is there? Oh.
In the mid Big East. After we left, before Pitt came over, they're playing Cincinnati this weekend.
Oh, wow.
And
That's pretty good.
And Cincinnati looked good last week.
Yeah,
and so
they did.
and that's the new Scott Satterfield team. I want to see how that Pitt Cincy game turns out. That's going to be an interesting one too.
I agree.
But anyway, that's going to do it for the pod tonight. You can hit us on Twitter, but it's X. You can hit us on X at 2DVT. You can check out the shows we did. Our season preview was been doing really good numbers. Me and Robbie's episode from last week did well. And of course, the 2 latest CFB Mondays are on the feed. I'll be back at 9 a.m. on Monday to do the week 2 recap. Not sure who my guest is going to be quite yet, but Kyle Bailey joined me last week, and that was freaking awesome. I really appreciated him coming through. And you can email us. It's 2dvt@gmail.com is the email address. All of our stuff's up on sonsofsaturday.com if you need to find any of our pods, any of that stuff. And until next week when we're celebrating a hopefully big win over Purdue, Pete, go Hokies.